this is the third to last day at COP, and I'm sure that like we've achieved a lot all collectively together, including in this wonderful multi-level action and urbanization pavilion. And hopefully today we'll tackle climate change together, like someone who's lost their keys in a storm snow and trying to find it. It's urgent, it's challenging, but we have to get there. I'm Horia Salehi. I'm the head of Urban Research, Innovation and Development team at ICLEI and co-chair of Research and Innovation Technical Working Group at Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. It's a pleasure for me to moderate this wonderful panel because we have a wonderful lineup of speakers and thought leaders who I get really inspired talking to them. And now I've been lucky to have all of them on the same panel. Without further ado, I would like to delve into the conversation of today before inviting our panelists on the panel. So we all know that where we stand, and a quick recap of what we have heard across COP. According to the 2023 UNEP GAP report, if all the unconditional NDCs are realized by 2030, then we are on track to limit global warming to 2.9 degrees. And if all the unconditional ones are realized, we are on track to limit global warming to 2.5 degrees, which is very different from what we were hoping, 1.5 degrees, right? And according to World Meteorological Organization, we are on track to exceed 1.5 degrees in just 2027. So we all know that we need to scale up the actions that we do. And on that front, ICLEI has been working with local governments and cities to ensure that what they are currently working on is solid. We provide capacity building and research and innovation type of work and implementation and coordination and helping them with their climate action planning and delivering the promises of achieving sustainable development and their climate resilience on the ground. We delivered a very wonderful session during the first week with my colleagues from our Carbon Center. However, there is another track of work for ICLEI, and that is advocating for novel approaches to not only climate change, but to the polycrisis situation that we face today. And not only navigating the existing and known crisis that we are observing, but also the uncertainties and emerging crisis and future crisis that we may face. Probably in 2018 and 2019, no one was thinking of an incident like pandemic that could change the landscape of the way we live, the way we eat, the way we commute, and that happened. Or the case of war between Russia and Ukraine is another disruption that showcases that we cannot really anchor all our work around just climate. Rather, we need to take a broader perspective and redefine our vision to tackle the challenges we face, but also provide flourishing lives for current and future population. As based on my count this morning, we were 8.1 billion people on this planet. But looking into the horizons of next decades of this century, we are going to hit 9, 10, potentially 11 billion people soon, which means that we really need to think how we are going to feed, how we are going to provide shelter and basic human needs, but also moving beyond that and making sure that all these big population of 11 billion people have flourishing life and opportunities to thrive, and at the same time ensuring that we repair the natural systems of this planet. So this is basically what we are going to talk about today, and the conversation is going to be around research and innovation. So with that, I don't know if our colleague Murakef Anastadin is already online. That's wonderful. So with that and without any further ado, I would like to invite our first panelist, Murakef Anastadin, the Director of Carbon Climate Action and Director of Business Development at ICLEI, to sort of take the floor and share their thoughts, particularly with regard to the novel approaches that ICLEI is promoting and collaborating with partners such as UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, Mission Innovation, and UN Habitat and other partners in this space. Baraka, I know that's an ungodly hour in Bonn, 7 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday morning. Really appreciate your presence. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pouria. Good day, everybody. It's lovely to be with you today at the Multi-Level Action and Urbanization Pavilion at COP28. And apologies that I cannot be there in person. As you know, we are in dire straits. I think the whole COP conversation around tackling the global climate emergency is an absolutely critical conversation, and I hope we will have a successful outcomes of the COP. Regardless of what will happen in that space, we, together with UN Habitat, ICLEI, with its role as a focal point of the local government and municipal authorities, constituencies, so working together with other city networks, regional networks, and this pavilion creates a wonderful space to show what are we doing, the action focus. As the director of ICLEI's Carbon Climate Center, I would like to share with you ICLEI's approach, our exciting approach and experiences in promoting novel and innovative solutions. We don't stand still. We are really looking to cutting edge activities, and we really also are looking into exploring how to enhance the science policy practice interface to address the poly crisis we face today. Now, we are at a critical junction. The fate of humanity literally depends on our fast and effective action now and into the future, the next decade. My entry point is the global climate emergency and the imperative to enable people to have flourishing lives, as Dennis Famulin always says to us. But again, not looking at people today only, but also into the future, addressing people and the place they are in. The Earth will continue even if we fail on the climate change space. So really looking at humanity. Now, Pouria mentioned the UNEP GAP report. I think it's important to understand that that looks into by 2030, we should have achieved a percentage of emission reduction. People, we are now in 2023 and 2024 is looming. You see the problem. So we need to find another way to approach this transition and have a higher impact in a shorter time scale. This means innovation and creativity are called for. So how do we transform, not just looking at it from an environmental perspective, but definitely social and economic perspective as well, to shift from problem solving towards solution finding? It is actually, if you think of it, an amazing different approach. So take an example, Western medicine, the doctor, you go to the doctor, you say, I have a pain here, they give you a pill for that pain. But they're not asking, looking at the holistic system of your body and we at the holistic system of the world, what is a bigger problem, and looking at it from a more cohesive perspective. Now, ICLEI does exactly that. We work with our global network of cities, towns, and regions in more than 125 countries. We're looking at sustainable urban development. So sustainable development is at the heart of our approach, and climate action is a central part of that. Now, the collective action that we know can be achieved at the local level is clear. It is also demonstrated. Our local leaders are showing amazing things that they're working on, sharing this through our Daring Cities forums, showing their bold and transformative actions, the local leadership, the political leadership, but also being brave and testing new approaches and solutions. That is the space that I would like us to address and look into today. Now, one of the key outcomes and messaging of the Daring Cities Forum this year was that cities are really already at the cutting edge of innovative climate solutions, and that they are looking towards protecting their territory, protecting the people, businesses, the industry in their territory. So it's a different way, a different role of a local government, actually. And that evolution is part of our thinking. How can we guide our decision makers, our policy makers, to look at the data, look at information coming in, getting a clear understanding for their baseline and the current status, and then planning in an ambitious and creative way. And there we need to have everyone on board. So again, in the municipality, as it echoes the national level, you have people in departments, and sometimes the departments just don't speak with each other. That's what we're trying to create, is everybody having a conversation with each other, but also an understanding that the priorities of your neighbor might not be the same priorities as yours, but you need to listen and bring that into the bigger holistic perspective. So we are exploring good practice is what can become a good practice, or what is even a best practice, which means everybody should be able to implement it. Where are the disruptive technologies and approaches that we can bring into our work, but also looking at value generation, and reflecting and respecting the different perspectives that come in and that are critical to bring that environmental, socioeconomic change and transition. Now, we work with so many different kinds of local and regional governments, from the mega cities, the districts, major provinces or subnational states, to smaller communities, and each have their own problems and their own context. But we do see a thread and a similarity across them as well. And that's where we step in with our partners, UN Habitat, UNEP, the private sector, to also understand and have these conversations. Science, policy, and practice, how can we work better together? And what is the distinctive role that each of us can play in informing through cutting-edge science decision-making and our policy processes? Now, yes, we work with local and regional governments, so that is policy that needs to be implemented at the local level. Policy leads to action. Now, where we have a disconnect, and this is also why we are calling this pavilion the multi-level action pavilion, every level of government has to play a particular role, but it has to be a distinctive and separate role. There shouldn't be an overlap of roles. There should be a seamless line, and roles and mandates need to interconnect with each other, that your national level sets the scene, guides the strategy in the country, but enables for the subnational governments to enhance and enable them to act. Quite often we see at the national level that there is not an enabling framework, which is a major problem for us. It doesn't allow innovation quite often. So that is where we need national government representatives reflecting on, just create a system that enables and allows your subnationals and other actors to move and to be creative and innovative. At the local level, again, monitoring and tracking, and that for us, it's really important that the data comes in. We collaborate with CDP ICLEI Track as our reporting system, our global reporting system, where we look at the data that is self-reported, that informs us as to where things are moving or not moving. And that again will inform, and we hope it will be really part of the IPCC process, where the city space is recognized. We need to better inform the IPCC assessments and special reports, and including the summaries for policymakers. The work that has gone into that in the past has shown that it is high impact work to help our local leaders understand opportunities. And again, that gives a snapshot for us to bring in the ICLEI expertise and what our ICLEI network of 2,500 are doing. And it is amazing to see the potential, the interest, the ambition at the local level. Again, what we now need to do is make sure that we can enable the space from national level to local level to allow that the creative juices flowing, and to make sure that we can definitely give better guidance and inform the forthcoming special report on cities and climate change. Looking forward to working with all of you on that. This is an important endeavor, and we need all hands on deck. Thank you, and back to you, Pouria.
Thank you so much, Morag. I really appreciate that. That's exactly the type of person coming from decades of experience working with cities and showcasing ICLEI's leadership in this space, but also showing the direction to which our organization is heading when it comes to research and innovation. So much appreciated, Morag. Particularly, I really like the example of Western medicine. Oftentimes, you're quick with diagnosis of symptoms, and if you're not really looking into root causes, it may actually lead to maladaptation in the forms of side effects in our body. That's exactly the same thing. Like cities are living organs, right? And the speed of change is massive. The way we are living, the way we are eating, the way we are meeting is different today, and therefore we cannot really hang on the previous old conventional approaches. And we do need to opt for the type of novel approaches that is crafted around human needs, and making sure that we can navigate all these challenges together, knowing that local realities matters, and what we observe in Africa is different from Asia, and what we observe in Asia and will face in Asia is different from Europe and the rest of the world. And of course, like you rightly pointed out, Daring Cities as our flagship initiative to address climate emergency, that's a space that we convene solutions and sort of peer exchange between cities, and showcasing good sometimes calling it best practices, but also our hope is to show sort of showcase the next practices for cities. You're going to get back to that. I see Yunus is there, and I'll make sure to get back to you, Yunus, because I know you have a lot to offer on that front. Moving forward, and please stay with us, Muraka. Moving forward, I would like to invite my lovely colleague Dennis Pamlin, the Executive Director of Mission Innovation Net Zero Compatibility Initiative, to the panel to a little bit, as you see fit. Like you can stay here and talk, but I would love for you, Dennis, to a little bit walk us through this expanded climate and innovation agenda for cities and regions that we have been working on, and sort of showcase the role of city networks, including ICLEI in this space. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I will not do that. I will not walk you through. I will run very fast. The slides will be up there, so don't be afraid if you don't catch everything. But it's really about what we have been working with ICLEI about, and Masamba and UNFCCC about an expanded climate innovation agenda. So much is still back in the 90s, where the whole idea was to make initial reduction in existing systems. That was the whole idea of Kyoto. So we created tools, ideas, and structures to deal with that. But then after Paris, we were starting to look at the global sustainability, but we're still stuck in the 90s with so many of our tools and thinking. So we said that we should expand the agenda. We should, of course, keep on trying to reduce emissions from current sectors. But what happens if we broaden the perspectives and shift from sectors to human needs, and not from those that are polluting, but those who can provide solutions? That's a very different ballgame. So, and there are two things that makes this absolutely necessary also, because if we had the current climate strategy today, 30 years ago, we would sit with fossil-free typewriters. And companies will try to build fossil-free oil platforms. They were just trying to do what they do, but in a fossil-free way. That is, of course, absurd. There's so many new ways. Technology is emerging. We shouldn't talk about fossil-free cars. We should ask what kind of mobility is needed, and even access, because we can have virtual meetings, city vertical farming, etc. So you can get access to nutrition, etc. in so many other different ways. But also that the first round was divided into North and South. North should do incremental improvement, South adaptation. If we talk about the future, everyone should live flourishing lives. We need a global agenda that focuses that everyone on the planet derives the kind of solutions that everyone on the planet can use. If not, because much in the global north now that we call green or sustainable is not. It might be called fossil-free, but it will not be possible to use for the rest of the world. In Sweden, we talk about sometimes biofueled private jets. There's no life on Earth that would sustain that kind of solutions, but we don't address that because it reports zero carbon or low carbon. Next. So much of our work was, next please, was around companies. But companies were moving behind that and said, okay, the first round was about us doing climate risk innovation. We have a problem, we need to reduce that. And that's Carbon Manager, that's driven by reporting, that is Supply Chain Manager. Now we're saying the world needs solutions. That is the R&D department, sales department, business model innovation department. They are looking at what solutions that are needed. So the leading companies were starting to move, but we saw cities and others was stuck with the tools of the 90s. So the only role of a city was to be a reducer of emissions. Next slide, please. So we said we need toolbox for this. Next slide, or next. So we have developed tools. We started with business, but now we also work with ICLEI and others to say, what kind of tools do you need specifically? So start exploring that. Next slide, please. So it's basically, which is saying that we have different stakeholders, companies, VCs, enablers, etc., but also cities now that we added to this. Next, that we work with ICLEI. And this is where I just want to sort of flesh out a bit, because current climate strategies, we talk about climate leaders, but it's really demand creators. That's the only thing that climate leaders usually see as in cities. They're trying to reduce emissions, create demand for new solutions. That is great, of course. But the drive is usually compliance responsibility. We need to do that because we report this to the UNFCCC, or we report that to the European Commission, or our national government is requiring us to do that. And then it's territorial targets, etc. So it's all these sort of old ways. You know that. But what happens? Next slide. if we start thinking about tomorrow's. Then I don't only think about me reducing emissions, I'm thinking about my role as a city to deliver the solutions of tomorrow. I have startups, companies, ideas that can be used in the rest of the world. So instead of the driver being compliance, reporting, claiming to get down to zero, it's about my legacy. What kind of mayor, what kind of city do I want to live in? But also the opportunities. What kind of workplaces, what kind of export opportunities exist in my city? I used to compare Baoding in China, who was quite high on carbon emissions, but exported solar power, wind, LEDs, and then Swedish cities. Reducing emissions, really good, but exporting SUVs, fossil of those. And then we called the Swedish cities climate leaders, but we didn't even mention Baoding in China. So what happened in this world? And that is not to say that what Sweden was doing was only bad, but totally ignoring Baoding felt really strange because that mayor saw what future was heading and wanted to build that city. In a coal-driven economy, yes, but he was investing for the future. Next, please. So that's what we've done there. And I'll just briefly go through a couple of tools and say, this sounds very complicated. No, it's not. So with ICLEI, for instance, we scanned hundreds now of different strategies in cities to see what kind of solution leadership do they have and what kind of human leadership do they have. And we used IPCC P1 pathways with the scientists there to say, what are the keywords we need to, like sharing, decentralization, and human needs being in focus, not saying big polluters reducing. What happens then? Ding, next. And then we can do this tailor-made. Ding, next. Because cities are very different. So then you can look at the different cities and put them up on a map and say, who are leading on needs? Who are leading on solutions? Being next. And then you can see, I want to see those with low GDP. I want to see those with large cities. I want to sort of filter those to see which one do I want to compare with. And next, Bing. And then you can look at the cities. And then you can see, this is, I think, is Addis Ababa, for instance, really strong on human needs, really weak on emerging technologies. Why is that? Is that because they don't have capacity, or maybe because they're working with innovations that are not tech-based? But it allows us to see what kind of cities are doing in this human needs space. Bing, next. So yeah, that's the gap. Bing, yeah, it's going a bit slow when you turn to this. So what we found, what I think was really interesting, David, especially thanks to you, who did lots of this scanning work, was that much of the current climate strategies were not very interesting and not really focused on these human needs. But there were many innovation strategies, even resilience strategies, export strategies that were filled with these kind of ideas. So why didn't we engage them? And when you spoke with them, sometimes climate was not even mentioned, but they were driving and pushing for those kind of solutions because that's where the society is moving. Next slide. So, and that's where we help them now with these kind of tools. This is one, it's about business development and city development that's sort of going together. Next, where we can look at what kind of role do you have? So, and I think I'll end here, and you're saying that what we saw then was there's a traditional role back in the gray little area. That's where the environmental strategies usually are. They say their role is to reduce emissions, and their goal is to report those reduced emissions. But when you look in exporting solutions, when you're looking to be human needs driven, delivering on those, that's Ministry of Housing, that's Ministry of Nutrition. When we invited in Ethiopia, it was the Ministry of Skills and Labor who came and said, this is where we need to build capacity for the future. Minister of Climate, you're saying, oh, how can we get some resilience money or adaptation money in an international conference? Nothing bad with that. But that's where the international conference has come to. It's not a driver for innovation. It's a game when you're just trying to get some money or claim to be a leader instead of really reporting, are you delivering what society needs? So that was my 7 minutes. We have lots of other things. My latest that I just need to talk about is where we talk about brain science also. It's one of the future, talking about Perry and America was talking next level of innovation. Do we live in a society with brain pollution? That we, through fast fashion, fast food, fast social media, is becoming dopamine driven. So we don't think long term. What happens in a city when you start thinking about your city from a brain science perspective? Are people being allowed to be creative? Or are they just plastered with advertising, fast food, stress all the time? And if we think we can deal with global challenges in that environment, are we fooling ourselves? So these are sort of the next generation of thinking also that cities maybe should use the latest brain science to ask, what are the actual environment in our cities? So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. That is, like always, very inspiring, and I think the way you sort of unpacked the principles of this expanded climate and innovation agenda was very interesting. And you ended on a very interesting note of brain science that, you know, how much stolen my heart. We had a very interesting session about brain science at the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub. And the reality is, when we are talking about transformation, we can only address the events and symptoms and patterns. But if you really want to ensure that there is a meaningful transformation in place, we need to start from mindset shift. And when it comes to mindset shift, that's where the behavioral change that Simona and her department are doing a lot of work on that becomes really, really crucial. And that brain science angle is really interesting sort of perspective that is now offered into this discourse that I'm hoping that we see and we hear more about that. We're going to develop some interesting, cool materials for cities on that. Buckle up for that. But how that can really lead to some mindset shifts, which in turn we can leverage that to change our goals and then incentives, which ultimately will change the patterns and events, is something crucial to look into that. But I think like this is now the right moment to invite our panelists to join us on the panel, starting with Masamba Thioi, the Executive Officer of UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub. Masamba, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us. And then Ms. Diana Recken, Associate Professor at ITC. We've recently had an MOU in place with ITC, and she's also the coordinating lead author of IPCC Working Group 2 to AR6. And thank you so much, Diana, for taking your time and joining us here. My beloved colleague Leah Leander from UN Habitat, who's the force behind all these things that UN Habitat is doing. And she's going to share a lot about Innovate for Cities with us. And of course, Simona Zandholz, our colleague from United Nations University, the head of Urban Futures and Transformation Department. And of course, Yunus Arakan, who's always busy with a lot of things at the same time. But Yunus, this is great that we can steal your time for 30 minutes to join us on the panel. Thank you so much for that. So Masamba, I would like to start with you. You know, we've recently engaged with UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub and trying to support the work that you are doing, particularly with regard to innovation process that you are delivering through a series of workshops focused on human needs. You are one of the thought leaders of this expanded climate and innovation agenda for cities and regions that we are co-leading with Mission Innovation and your hub. So I would like to hear from you a little bit about ethos of UGIH, but also the collaboration with ICLEI and hopefully the partnership in the context of future events. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Puriya, and good morning to all of you. Very pleased to have this opportunity to interact in this very important topic. So my name is Masamba Thioi. I'm the project executive of the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, an initiative of the UNFCCC Secretariat launched at COP26 with a one-fold vision. How can we mobilize innovation to serve the many people and the planet? And a twofold mission. How can we contribute in accelerating and upscaling the deployment of existing solution? Now, when I'm saying solution, it's not just about technology solution. Technology solution will play a very important role, but I mean also innovative policy instrument, innovative financial instrument, innovative business model, cooperative approach, product from the culture and creative industry, and so and so. We believe that this is only when you form a cluster of integrated solution among these solutions that you can have the right response to a given demand. So the other component of our mission is how can we accelerate the development of the missing solution? So you have existing solution and you have the missing solution, and we need to work on all these different aspects. And then we have a threefold core value that justify why we are working with cities and why we have built a collaboration with ICLEI. These core values are articulated around three key principles: caring, sharing, and daring. Caring is very important because if we want to have climate and sustainability innovation, we have to genuinely care for the well-being and the needs of the many people and the planet. It's not about decarbonizing the industry. It's about satisfying the needs and providing flourishing life to the many people, but doing it in a way that is aligned with the global goal. And then the second aspect is sharing. To address the global challenge, we need to have a radical collaboration among all the stakeholders that are relevant. So it means that we need to share knowledge. And this is why the Global Innovation Hub is strongly supporting open source. We should not hide knowledge behind paywall. We need to share experience. We need to have a mindset of solution provider. As it was mentioned by Dennis, it's not about solving my own problem as a city, as a company, or as a nation, but it's more about developing solutions that others can also use. And we have to be daring. And that's a very important point if we want to innovate. Most of the time when we are setting climate and sustainability goal, the tendency is to set the goal on the basis of our understanding of what is possible, not based on what is needed. And this is what stuck us in a vicious circle where we cannot get out of. And I understand why people are setting their goal based on the perception of what is possible, because most of the time, when you set a goal and you are in front of a board of directors, the first question that we'll ask to you is, how will you go about your goal? How will you achieve your goal? And you cannot simply say, I don't know. If you do that, they will say you are not credible. And this is why the tendency is to set the goal based on the solution that exists already, so that you can say, I will combine solution A plus solution B to achieve my goal. And then everybody upload. You have a good understanding of what we want to do. Unfortunately, this is what blocks innovation. We need to set our goal and our target not based on the perception of what is possible, but based on what is needed, because this is precisely the gap between what is needed and what is possible today that is the main driver for innovation. So we need to promote this moonshot way of thinking. Otherwise, we are stuck in this vicious circle where those that are setting goal will say, I cannot be ambitious because I do not have the solution. And those that are developing the solution, I cannot develop transformative solution because I do not have the demand. And we are stuck. So moonshot way of thinking, caring, sharing, and daring. And this is why you can understand we are so interested in collaborating with ICLEI, particularly under the daring cities. And hopefully in 2024, we will put in place a collaborative space so that we can move forward in deep collaboration. Another aspect that is really important, and then I will conclude with that, is the systemic innovation process that Pouria has mentioned. We cannot address the challenge of climate and sustainability with the current framework for innovation. It is linear and it has to be interactive. Currently, innovation is product push. It means that you develop a product and you look for use cases. It's not how it should be. It should be demand driven. The needs of the many people, the needs of the planet is what should drive innovation. It is close. People working in silo, we need to have more open innovation and radical collaboration. It's why we have put in place the Systemic Innovation Workshop, where we bring together cities to understand what are their needs in terms of climate and sustainability. And then the other relevant stakeholder, financial, tech companies, startup, research institute, and make them co-create and co-evolve.
Thank you so much, Massamba. I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad to see that caring, sharing, and daring is resonating with what we've been doing, Daring Cities. So without any further ado, Yunus, I would like to yield the floor to you to actually reflect on what you heard from Musamba, but also in the context of collaboration in future events, including Daring Cities with UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Actually, I would be more interested to hear from other guests so that I can build upon, because that would be much more meaningful. If you allow me, would that be okay?
Of course,
So I think
always.
that would be much more in enriching the debate. So that
That's
we can keep
perfectly
it.
fine.
Okay.
You know, that's
So
we
let's
appreciate
follow-
that. Like you took your time. I know you're receiving a lot of messages and
No,
getting a
not
lot
that
of
big, but
distractions.
we have guests in this panel, so it's
Perfect.
really
No.
good to hear from them.
Thank you so much for that. So, sure, we'll make sure to get back to Yunus. Moving forward, I would like to move to Leah, knowing that there is the Innovate for Cities conference coming up in September 2024, and UN Habitat is co-organizing this with Global Covenant of Mayors, where ICLEI is one of the founding members of the Global Covenant, but also through our capacity as one of the core partners of the Research and Innovation Technical Working Group, collaborating with that. So I would like to hear from you, what are the aspirations of Innovate for Cities next year and where human needs come to the picture? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And if Yunus is going rogue, I will go rogue as an inspiration. Let me first maybe start with thank you for having me this morning, and appreciate that there is people in the room on the 10th of December. I feel all of our collective energies are slowly draining. We're almost there. And is to say, first of all, what is innovation? I think for many people, there's still a misperception. They think about innovation and they think about green hydrogen. They think about, the next new solar panel that's going to solve the world. And they think about people shooting up an umbrella into the sky. This is not necessarily what we're talking about when we talk about innovation. And I think that needs to be made really crystal clear, that it's also about policy innovation, finance innovations, human interaction innovations, and it's not just these new technical innovations. And I think, we cannot spread that message loudly and clearly enough. And then I had a second point, which was building on what Musamba just said before, is we are sometimes collectively not very good in communicating why we actually need action. And, you spoke about the goal, and that our goal is, we need to have a goal and need to get there with what is needed and not what we can do. But sometimes it feels really difficult for people outside of this space to even come together and see, why do we even need that goal? We need to tackle the climate crisis. What does that mean for somebody who is, not in this space here? So I think we also need to innovate in how we talk about climate and how we can make this conversation relevant for every single person. Just to give you an example, when I worked for years on energy, and people were like, well, energy, great, but why me? Like, what does this matter to me? Like, it's not about the energy, the solar PV on your roof. It's about what it gives to you. And the same thing about taking action on climate. It's of course about tackling the climate crisis, but also it's about air pollution. We can all, I don't think there's a single person out there that says, I hate clean air. 99% of us live in cities that have dirty air. Everybody can rally around that goal and say, we want to have clean air for our family, for our kids, for our future generations. We need to tackle this. That means we need to put certain things into place. We need to have that roadmap. We need to have innovation. We need to identify what is the action agenda. And then we can get there. We can disagree on some of the stuff on how we need to get there, but at least we can maybe hopefully agree on some of these entry points that action needs to be done. To take that loop back now, Innovate for Cities, and thanks for bringing that up. It looks like next fall will be a really busy time. Innovate for Cities is, of course, an event that has been going on for a while, first edition in Edmonton in 2018, but it's really a space where we can come together and collectively discuss with a variety of all the different stakeholders, national governments, local governments, but also research institutions and the private sector, and saying, what's the cutting edge research? What's the innovations the different range of innovations that need to be taken into account, and what can we collectively do to move that forward. So we'll have the next edition in Montreal, in Canada, in September 2024, hence the busy fall. So it's from the 10th until the 12th of September in Montreal, and really as a catalyst for these research and for partnerships that will hopefully help to fill that knowledge and action gap that we are seeing right now at the city level, but also at the global level. And it, of course, builds on a process that has been going on over the last couple months and years. It's the global marketplaces where the Global Covenant of Mayor, also in collaboration with UN Habitat, has brought together cities together with a variety of stakeholders, including the private sector, to say, what is it that you need and how can somebody help you to fill that gap? We'll also launch a new Montreal Center as UN Habitat, really on urban climate and biodiversity solutions. So of course that Innovate for City conference will link very nicely with that. And I think I'll just finish with saying I'm really encouraged to see what's been happening at COP28 and really putting cities on the spot. Maybe as a personal anecdote, last year we had the first ministerial meeting, urbanization and climate change. We had to convince ministers to come there. This year we got overrun by ministers. We want to be there. This seems to be relevant because actually it's the Minister of Environment and Climate Change and foreign ministers that come here to negotiate, but everybody needs to implement it afterwards. And if the ministers of housing and urbanization don't know what these discussions here are, how can they then support their cities, work with their building stocks to actually implement all of what needs to be done then at the local level?
Thank you so much, Leah. Really appreciate that. I think the way you unpack all of this could connect to so many ongoing things. It's like when you're talking about this momentum that's been created with more and more ministers engaged. I think one of the promises of this expanded climate innovation agenda, talking about human needs, is like not only talking to some ministers or some departments in the city that are just dealing with climate, but also opening up space for all of them. So that resonates well with that approach under ECIA. But also talking about Innovate for Cities, we're also looking very forward to make sure that a space is a thought leadership space and making sure that we are talking about innovation in the broader sense and in a way that we could really transform our communities to more sustainable spaces and moving away from just this silo thinking of, one innovation in one sector may actually be successful, but creating problems and trades of inequalities, for example, in other sectors. With that, I would like to move forward to our next speaker, the IPCC lead author. And I think I would like to quickly unpack a little bit the collaboration between ICLEI and IPCC in general and IPCC processes over the course of past few years. In 2016, ICLEI led the contribution of LGMA, local governments and municipal authorities constituency, to IPCC processes, influencing the discourse at the 43rd session of IPCC in Kenya, which led that session decided to include the special report for cities and climate change as part of the AR7. Moving forward in 2018, ICLEI collaborated with different partners, including UN Habitat, WRI, GCOM, C4D, and other peer organizations in curation and delivery of the Cities and Climate Change Science Conference, also known as Cities IPCC, which the primary output of it, to which ICLEI experts, including Moraka, contributed, was Global Research and Action Agenda, which was approved at the IPCC 48th session in Incheon in Korea in October that year. And building upon that, ICLEI, as the first global network of cities, adopted and developed the first of its kind, a Global Research and Action Agenda, which was approved in 2019 by Global Executive Committee of ICLEI. And since then, we've been actively supporting knowledge generation to address the gaps identified as part of the Global Research and Action Agenda. And moving forward in 2021, again, the Innovate for Cities, ICLEI was one of the core partners in curation and supporting UN Habitat and GCOM in data space. And the output of that conference was, again, the co-sponsored by IPCC, was the updated Global Research and Action Agenda. And of course, a summary for urban policymakers that ICLEI supported engagement of local leaders. And also we opened up a space in last COP in Sharm el-Sheikh for dissemination of it. And we ensured that there is a meaningful dissemination to the local policymakers. So Diana, thank you again for taking your time joining us. There is now a lot of excitement about this forthcoming element, special report on cities as part of AR7. And we have been coordinating with other peer organizations and city networks to put forward some local leaders and some practitioners for the scoping meeting that is upcoming in March and April. And we know that this is going to be a really, really important resource for cities, and we would like to make it an invaluable product, all of us. So what are your thoughts on the special report on cities, and how do you think city networks such as ICLEI can really gear up their support and engagement with IPCC to ensure that the special report is as meaningful as possible? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And in particular, thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, indeed. We are just in the scoping meeting. So the 7th assessment cycle of the new IPCC has started. And now there are tremendous submissions of people, of researchers who want to be part of the scoping meeting. I heard a number of 1,300 scientists that that are nominated by their national focal point, to be on the short list. But the city's report has a high and innovative aspect as well, in the sense that it could develop into a blueprint for how you can not only develop a special report that is based on a particular topic or sector, but that really integrates. And with that, only a smaller part of those who will be nominated will be scientists. A larger part, as I heard, will come from cities and will be city representatives. So that's a very strong mandate that the IPCC, the chairs have put up on themselves. And in that sense, we will see a high representation of cities that can actually put in their experience, their expertise, and be at the table of what will be in the city's report. Maybe even developing into a blueprint how you can also, in the subsequent special reports, develop a systems view and not only a silo view. There is already recent activity between IPCC and IPBES. There is more need to bridge science and businesses. So there are various ideas how integration can happen, and how also the IPCC in its process can open up to integrate more than just the pure scientific literature. There are also discussions how to open up to more policy relevant and non-purely science-based literature. So discussion on changing the process are there. I wanted to also make another point, and that is that opening up for engagement between science and cities, or science and practitioners, for me also would mean opening up not only to city representatives in terms of administration, but also towards NGOs, and most particularly representatives of vulnerable populations. So far, we have not really heard about this in that panel, and our research shows that while we are on the city level more and more developing adaptation and mitigation plans, actually integrating representatives or citizens who really need to be at the table, who are usually classified as the vulnerable population, they are increasingly left out. So we have done a temporal analysis, and over time we have more adaptation plan, but less integration of vulnerable groups in those planning processes. So there is a lot where we need to go. We see that also based on research that the higher level of engagement is, the higher is the transformative potential. So we've seen the more you integrate and cooperate in an honest manner with citizen organizations, the higher is the transformative potential of the adaptation plan as well as the mitigation plan. So this means people on the ground want more transformation. Yeah, we have surely seen that. I would also say that we need more monitoring and evaluation, and that in recurrent time frames. So not only once in time, but maybe every 3 times, or every 3 years or 4 years after we've implemented an action or a policy. And with that, I am a little bit going against what Dennis said in the beginning, that we need a completely different maybe starting point or questioning the system and the root causes. To be honest, in the transformation as we define it in the IPCC is a change in scope, depth, or speed. And we had a lot of discussion whether not only incremental but fast changes, one after the other, always after an M&E event, could actually also lead to transformation. And I can't really give an answer on that yet, whether we need really a change in scope and depth, or just a change very frequently, one after the other, every 2 years, a big change, every 2 years, and the intermediate 2 years an M&E event. Yeah, and then also come along, so to say, adaptation and mitigation pathways to a transformative change. Then maybe in closing up, I also see a value in citizen assemblies. So I think these need to be much more a standing point of engagement between cities and the population itself. I've heard that Brussels very recently adopted the first standing citizen assembly in Europe, and as a European city. And I really would like to see more cities who are actually having a standing citizen assembly that is asked for recurrent and every major change that the administration is going for.
Right.
So yeah, that were maybe my main points. And with
Thank you
that,
so
indeed, I'm looking forward to the city's report being a change maker, maybe also for the IPCC, right?
Thank you so much, Diana. That was super helpful. You unpacked a lot in your points, but I really like that idea of the fact that engaging with cities from the get-go will actually enhance the buy-in, and possibility of influencing policymaking at the local level would increase. And based on the conversation that we had earlier, rumors have it that colleagues responsible at the IPCC process are looking into creating a balance between scientific people and practitioners in the scoping meeting, which is really positive. So let's hope for this change from the beginning. Moving forward with our next speaker, knowing that you're running out of time, thank you so much. The manager of the pavilion gave a positive thumbs up, which means that we have a couple of more minutes. That's wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Simone, United Nations University is not only a university, but also a think tank for UN system. And we have a sort of close collaboration through Memorandum of Understanding. We've been engaging and supporting each other's activities on multiple fronts. And we have in common working at the interface of science and policy. So a lot came up here from human needs-based perspective, the IPCC perspective, but then taking innovation to the direction that is needed and all the events upcoming. I would like to understand from your perspective, what would you like to add to this discourse, and what are your thoughts moving forward, knowing this whole landscape is changing on many fronts? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, first of all, for the invitation. I can only echo what has already been said, including many of the points that were made. Maybe let me touch upon the need for innovation and the human needs-based approaches that were already tackled. And in the end, that would have to lead towards this transformation everybody is buzzwording with, let's be honest, because so far, very often, we would not yet know what does it actually mean. We have a sense of what bits and pieces should be part of it, but what is it actually? And that is what we're trying to do. And that's a topic I know Iqbal and us, we have in common. We were going wild about defining it and operationalizing it. And that's one thing that we're trying to do right now in a long-term study, among others. And that I think resonates with much of what has been said. So we really look into what changes do we need to see, and how do we bring together the fact that transformation would have to be a process, but also a goal, but kind of a goal that then has to change further. It has to stay agile and mobile, but it has to also be rooted in linking different bits and pieces, different sectors within the urban environment. In particular, we talk about urban transformation, and including also the mindsets that you started talking about today. So that's actually, we have the luxury of having such a long-term study looking into how do we trigger innovation or transformation, how does it come across? And we started with the assumption, maybe we all need to bring people like having the same perspective, bring them together. So we started from assessing the local communities. We're working very much on the local level. So we've heard a lot about the urban level and the urban government level. We need to include the very local level. That's even more true in cities that have a high level of informality, and that's where we're working. We started off from, hey, let's see what's the perception about climate change. How do they come together? What do we need to change? And what we found is we don't necessarily need to change anything. We just need to bring them together. So after a couple of years of doing this kind of basic research, we see just by working together, just by providing the spaces, and I think you just mentioned the assemblies, it was even more informal. We formed living labs, bringing together scientists, but also very many local people in these communities. We see that it's not necessarily the mindsets that are changing, they're geared towards more integration. That's probably the key change we need to see. We need to inject this perception that collaboration makes sense, that together we can achieve much more in cities, including on the very local level. And that we also, and that's very much key here, we need to tell stories and narratives that people can relate to. And that's another point I want to make here. Over the past 2 years, so this year and last year, we brought a photo exhibition on cities, actually to COP. It's in the Capacity Building Hub. And that comes with a questionnaire. So we asked people to send us photos. Last year, it was, for instance, about what to you as a desirable and sustainable city. Beautiful photos from across the world, just using a different way of displaying it, not using text and whatever, but using photography, using visual media. And next to a little questionnaire. And then we had a kind of a comparable questionnaire at COP asking delegates to answer us what to you as a desirable, sustainable city. In the end, the categories are very much the same and very often not related to the technology or to the finance, but to the emotions, to the feelings, to the attachment that I have to a city. And that is very much key. If I want to act on something, I need to find it valuable, because else I don't appreciate. And then I might not want to input or put that much input. The challenge I want to put here, the one thing that really struck me was, it's the same categories that were put by the local people and by delegates or anyone coming to COP. The way this is phrased was fundamentally different and way too jargony. Not a surprise. We've been here for a couple of days and we've heard very jargony presentations probably. But if I explain it like that to someone in a local community, they will not understand. So it's also about how do we then bring the messages and the narratives across? And that I think is very, very much key. And we need to challenge ourselves as researchers and also bringing research to policy by thinking about new and innovative ways of transmitting, of giving the message and passing it across. And that is also by not always being, probably also taking us researchers at some point out of the loop and giving the space for local to local communication. That is where cities networks, but also local networks are very much engaged and very much needed as well. So that, I think, was to me the eye-opener. We also brought a very local representative from one of the local communities we're working with in Buenos Aires here. She started from not knowing which crazy place are you bringing me to, but I want to tell what we're doing there in our informal community in Villavente in Buenos Aires. And she left saying, until next year, I'll learn better English. I need to tell them more about what we're doing, and I want to communicate more about it. And I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Simone. That was really inspiring, and it's really impressive to see that you're trying to distill the knowledge within your institute and take it to the local community and working with them. And that's exactly where the collaboration with ICLEI comes from. So today we heard a lot, from symptoms to root causes from Moraka, anchoring the whole agenda on human needs from Dennis, systemic innovation processes from Mosamba, the conversation and excitement around IPCC special report from Diana, and the Innovate for City upcoming from Leah, but of course, like the points that Simone mentioned. Yunus, now we would like to hear from you, and what are your reflections to what you heard and how this can impact the thinking, the framework, and the design around Next Daring Cities and World Congress? The floor is yours.
I think, thanks, Puriya. First of all, congratulations for this really distinguished panel and bringing all our partners. I think it's really good, giving us the hope to work for the future and to celebrate our achievements together. Since both Marieke and you have, and Mosamba has mentioned a lot on daring cities, I just would prefer to take the discussion a bit broader, to continue this discussion about where the cities and regions in the innovation process, because it's really an interesting relation. In most cases, we innovate first and we bring to the UNFCCC. And when something is adapted to the UNFCCC, we bring back to the cities and we rapidly roll it out. One example, the term carbon dioxide appeared in the UNFCCC text when Kyoto Protocol 97. There was in the 92 UNFCCC, it's only greenhouse gas, it doesn't say carbon dioxide. The first project of ICLEI in 1991 is the name, Urban Carbon Dioxide Reduction Project, in 1991, when there was no UNFCCC agreement on the greenhouse gas list. The cities were already accounting their greenhouse gases, calculating its emission reduction potentials, and putting it into the implementation plans. So this was a push. It shows how much we can be on the front. And then when it's rolled out, we go back. So, and the idea of pushing this dialogue, again, there was the citizen assemblies. We have now moving this process of town hall COPs, which is institutionalization of the stock take at the local and global level. That's then fantastic, again, leadership of the Citizen Assembly. So the point is, if we are in the climate emergency mode, because Dubai will be defining the climate action in the emergency mode, emergency era, and it will be in an urban world. That's why it is important, and that's why we're so importantly involved in that. It is different than in the previous ones. And let's remember, in the 1990s, the UN debate was driven by the scientists, because it was the scientists who put this on the table. Then came engineers with accounting, planning, then lawyers because of the emissions trading, finance community, all these markets and all this stuff. And starting from Paris and onwards, and especially now, we are seeing more and more social scientists. We are seeing more and more those social transformation leaders. IPCC was used to discuss only those natural sciences They were not talking about anthropologists. And as the cities climate conference inspired the culture and climate conference as well. I was delighted to be part of the steering committee of this exercise. For the first time, we had made IPCs to discuss about social sciences as well. And that's why the AR7 is so much important with the spatial report on cities. So the transformation needs all hands on deck, and it's time for social transformers. And the best social transformers are urban leaders. And that's why this outcome from this COP, we're so happy that we have this initiative on CHAMP, we have tools. We are confident that we will be the best partners of the nations who are now embarking on a new journey, that they are not alone, because the social transformers are with them, hand to hand, and even telling them how to do it in many cases. So that, I think, is why our daring cities will be important, because every year the COP goes to somewhere else in the world, but every year they come back to Bonn. Bonn is their regular place to meet. And that's why we are proud to Resident Cities now evolved in the daring cities. So that gives us the hope and chance that we can influence and then move forward. So that's why I'm very excited, all our partners in the panel, all of you here. It's really a very positive message. We should go back to our university students that there's a big world being designed and we are part of it, and we should just make it amplified.
Thank you so much, Yunus. That was really impactful, and hopefully soon next year again we'll curate and bring all these wonderful people back to base in Bonn and continue the conversation. I see that Diana has their hand up. In the meantime, I would like to invite Dennis also join the panel for the last round of quick 30 seconds closing remarks. Starting with Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pooya, and also thank you, Yunus. I just want to add to what you say that actually there are other forms that are a little bit ahead of the IPCC, and I need to be careful how I phrase that. But many people probably know the Urban Climate Change Research Network, and Maria is here. We are developing similar assessment reports, but on a much more inclusive, open, and also interactive manner than other fora. And we are soon to be launched Maria, what is it? ARC33, third assessment report for climate change in cities, where we also have a more interdisciplinary approach and not only go for sectors. Yeah, so this is also coming ahead of the special report on cities, and we hope to inform the discussions by way of those more interactive reports as well.
Thank you so much, Diana. You stole my words, because that was my last announcement, because we have Maria Domborov, the global coordinator of UCCR and the principal editor of ARC 3.3, to which ICLEI contributed with a section about agenda setting innovation, led by myself and Dennis Pamelin. And tomorrow we are launching ICLEI's digitalization policy brief and soft launching some elements of ARC 3.3 at the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub Pavilion. So please make sure you are there as well at 10 a.m. Leah, apart from the points that you raised about Innovate for Cities, you mentioned innovation in policy, and AR6 has made the point that improved infrastructure, utilization of digitalization, and innovative policy can help us reduce 70% of GHG by 2050. That was a very great point, and I would love to hear your final thoughts and closing remarks around innovative policy. The floor is yours.
How much time do you have?
30 seconds.
I mean, innovative policy in 30 seconds is impossible, but I think actually it also comes down to where can cities decide what? And the innovation is in the collaboration between national governments and city governments. I mean, until a couple months ago, just as a specific example, and now this has changed because the EU has just passed a law. I did the research myself. There was no single national government that had a solar PV mandate, but cities had it. Cities and local subnational governments had a mandate. If you build a house, you need to have solar PV on the rooftop. That is innovation in itself that can then be replicated. So the policy innovation is very simple. It's just collaboration between the different levels of government.
Thank you so much. You still had 3 more seconds, but wonderful.
Really?
Thank you. While we go to Simone for her closing remarks, I just wanted to ask our lovely pavilion team to see if it is possible to put Moraka back on the screen for their closing remarks as well. Simone, your last closing remarks and 2 cents.
Oh, I can choose the top.
Of course.
No, great.
You get a special treatment.
Woohoo. No, following up on the innovative policy, I also think that does require inclusion of local citizens and translation of also the root causes that influence the policy making to the local level so that people relate with it and resonate with it. And it will also very much imply an equity and justice perspective, particularly in global South cities. That would be my wish.
Thank you so much. Yunus, naturally it comes to you. Your last words, if you have any.
Well, Dennis, I remember you sharing very well because together with Shagun and Cynthia, we launched the first version in 2010 at the Resident Cities Congress. So I fully believe this is an excellent push to the IPCC to expand. So I'm very happy to do that. I see Moraka on the screen. Maybe we give her the last word so that...
Moraka is always having the last word. But before moving to Moraka, I would like to go back to Dennis Pamlin and here, Dennis, what do you like to see next year when we are back to COP? And how do you hope that the discourse will change to really moving away from this carbon tunnel vision and really looking into flourishing lives for current and future population?
Well, I think the big question right now, and that is most of the world is struggling with, we don't really have a positive vision for the future. So, and that is also affecting climate change. People are thinking about just reducing emissions, but is that really a vision for taking us forward? And one thing that I've struggled with working with business and innovation for the last 30 years is that so little of climate solutions have come out of the climate discussions and innovation. That is, as you said, it's been lawyers and others, creative accounting that has been innovation. But actual societal transformation, if you talk about sharing, if you talk about digitalization, etc., nothing of that actually has been working against much of the climate policy. When I was working in NGOs, we were trying to have FSC certified papers instead of smart things. We tried to get natural gas into cars instead of smart city planning, etc. So much of the work has not really been focused on flourishing lives. So I think this idea of a better life is really focused and really try to understand where is tomorrow born? Where are people with passion? That's where I want to put the incubators and the startups at the heart of this, because that's where young people are trying to create tomorrow. And that's not where we work. We work with the big polluters and the biggest, slowest people in the systems and trying to say, how can you account for your problems instead of how do you build the future?
Thank you, Dennis. And I think this resonates a lot with what we believe at ICLEI in the sense of shifting the role of cities from a merely service provider to community enablers where all the actors collectively can deliver on our shared goals. And the last words for our beloved Moraka, that is, thank you again, Moraka. Sunday morning, early in the morning, really appreciate that. But your leadership has been second to none at ICLEI when it comes to providing a space for research and innovation. So I would love to hear your last words concluding this panel for us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pooya. Wow, what a lovely panel and lovely panelists. I think what we see here on stage now, we see multidisciplinary stakeholders, multiple stakeholder perspectives. I think Diana, Masamba, Dennis, Leah, Simone, Yunus, Pooya, we bring together an amazing repertoire of expertise, and I really appreciate our partnership with each of your individual persons, your teams, and your organizations. So first of all, I think the space is ready for stepping up that innovation and creation space. Dennis, I love your vision. We need to shape the vision together with the youth. For ICLEI, the youth is really a core part of our new way of framing things, making sure that we bring together people, that we listen to people and respect their different perspectives, bringing that into shaping the vision. I think it's a fun space for us. There's massive potential, and we should not be waiting for the policies to change at national level. We definitely need to step up I love Simona's perspective where you say really bringing in the citizens. That's very much at the heart of the ICLEI approach, making sure that your local or regional government knows how to set up these inclusive, good governance systems and approaches, making sure that they are the leaders and drivers, but that they listen and bring their communities together. So I think making climate change and action understandable, I think, is important. The narrative has to change. We should indeed stop talking about just mitigation and reducing emissions. People don't get it, but you need to show opportunities for work, for having a fun-filled quality of life. So let's innovate, let's create, let's step up together, focusing on scale and impact, and bring your passion to the table. Everybody we were speaking today was really committed, keen to go. Let's take that stock take information, but help us rethink and reframe the way we communicate and the way we work with different stakeholders. Thank you. Back to you, Purya.
Thank you so much, Morake. Really appreciate that. And unfortunately with this, but with that positive note that Morake shared, fortunately, we are coming to the end of this panel. But before closing that, I would like to acknowledge the wonderful work of our multi-level action and urbanization pavilion team, that they are working around the clock to make this happen. And we have this space to exchange ideas. Thanks to Joe, Johanna, Julia, and other colleagues. So please, all of us, join me in giving a round of applause to the pavilion team and to our wonderful panelists and thought leaders. Looking forward to having you in Bonn at Daring Cities. Thank you.